Among the old maps of the Appalachians, tucked away in a dusty drawer of the Jackson County archives, there lies a note that had gone unnoticed for decades. A single paragraph, handwritten in 1887 by the county surveyor. The Denvers refused the census. The house is not subject to inventory. I do not recommend sending people there without extreme necessity. This phrase was the first thread in a chain of events that would lead us to one of the strangest and most disturbing discoveries in the history of rural America. A story where doubts about common sense arose long before the first clues. The Denver family appeared in the county registry in 1851. Edgar and Sybil, a married couple who bought a small plot in a mountain valley for a pittance. No friends, no relatives, no papers about their past. They built the house with their own hands and never mingled with others. They showed no interest in elections, taxes, schools, or church. Locals called them strange but peaceful. Occasionally, a woman descended from the hills to buy salt or bandages. It was said that she always paid with gold coins, which hadn't been seen in the area since colonial times. Rumors circulated. They had a dozen children. They were digging for something in the earth, and hunting in their forest was forbidden. Dogs and horses were said to disappear there. In 1873, 2 postal inspectors vanished in the county. The last place they were seen was the trail leading toward the Denvers' land. The search yielded nothing. The official report stated dryly, "Disappeared in difficult terrain." The family was never listed in another census. However, no bodies, no graves, not even scraps of clothing were ever found. The house stood, gray, lifeless, yet smoke rose regularly from its chimney. In 1892, another disappearance was recorded, that of the surveyor who wrote the original note. His horse returned to town alone. Over time, the Denvers were forgotten. Their land was declared ownerless. In 1904, 3 hunters stumbled upon it. The house had already collapsed. They swore they found a child's skull in the basement and chain marks on the walls, but the official report stated, "Ruins, no interest." No one approached the site for decades, until 2023. During wildfires, drones from a University of Tennessee research team detected an anomaly. Beneath the scorched earth, thermal imaging revealed a structure, a tunnel descending underground with voids mapped within. The location matched the Denver farm. This discovery sparked a new investigation. A team of archaeologists descended into the tunnel 3 weeks later and found something for which neither science nor history was prepared. Evidence of genetic experiments, medical procedures incompatible with the scientific knowledge of the late 19th century. Schematics, inscriptions, and, most hauntingly, remains. But before delving into the find itself, one question must be answered. Who were Edgar and Sybil Denver? Why did they hide from the world? And what exactly were they trying to preserve in their children? When the archaeologists first entered the underground tunnel beneath the Denver property, they expected to find the remains of an old storage shed, or, at best, a wine cellar. But beneath layers of earth, ash, and stones lay an entire system of chambers, constructed with a precision and calculation that far exceeded the technological capabilities of mountain farms of that era. The ceilings were lined with metal plates, and the walls were covered with strange markings, as if someone had spent years carving symbols resembling chemical formulas or a primitive cipher. At a depth of 6 meters, they discovered the first room. Inside were 3 wooden beds, massive and crude, yet with polished surfaces, as if someone had lain on them for a very long time. Nearby hung iron hooks on chains, embedded deep in the stone masonry. There was no trace of blood, but one chain remained taut, as though it had held something captive until the very last moment. On the floor lay fragments of clothing, a woolen child stocking, a torn piece of an apron, buttons. The most significant discovery was a metal box, hermetically sealed, heavily charred on the outside, but preserving papers inside. Initially, the researchers assumed it was a personal archive. Blueprints, diagrams, drawings of human organs, annotated in a strange blend of Latin and English. One sheet stood out particularly. It depicted the silhouette of an infant with unnaturally elongated limbs, with a caption beneath. Series D, Specimen Number 5, prematurely activated. The documents were sent for decoding. The initial analysis revealed that these were not simply medical records, but a systematic body of work on adaptive breeding, a term not used until the 1960s. Yet these records dated no later than 1880. By this point, it became clear that the underground level of the Denver farm was not a refuge or storage space, but a laboratory. Homemade, crude, but functional. And if the papers were to be believed, experiments had been conducted on children, possibly the Denver zone. Samples were taken from the walls, floor, and ceiling. The soil contained traces of phenol and formalin, chemicals used in embalming and antiseptics. One of the bricks was hollow. Inside was a glass vial containing a murky liquid and a fragment of dried flesh. Analysis revealed a rare DNA mutation characteristic of individuals born without the ability to feel pain. The most disturbing conclusion concerned the age of the samples. According to independent laboratories, some of the tissues were biologically fresh. They should not have survived more than 20 years under such conditions. Yet they did. How remained unclear. All these facts raised more questions than answers. Who were these children? Were they connected to the Denvers themselves? And most importantly, was anyone still alive? The answer came unexpectedly, thanks to a photograph found in a private museum collection in Ohio. It showed a fair in 1896. In the background, among the crowd, stood a man and a woman. The caption read, "Visitors from Appalachia." Their faces matched known sketches of Edgar and Sybil. Between them was a girl about 12 years old. She looked directly at the camera, her expression later described by researchers as disproportionately aware. A photograph from the 1896 fair became the first public record of someone allegedly connected to the Denvers. The girl positioned between Edgar and Sybil, identified by a museum tag as Livy, appeared about 12 years old at the time the photo was taken. Her gaze stood out from the rest of the scene. Amidst blurred silhouettes and indistinct features, her face was strikingly sharp, as if captured separately. This anomaly raised questions. Was a different photographic technique used? Or was there something unusual about the image itself? Yet, more significant than the photograph itself was where it was found, in the archives of a private collector from Cincinnati named Randolph Crow. His collection had been closed after his death in 1982, but was reopened for researchers by a museum. Among relics of the Victorian era, 2 more items linked to Livy surfaced. The first was a diary in French, fragmentary and missing its cover. It presumably belonged to a governess named Eugénie Duval, who came to the United States from Lille in 1893. She wrote about an unusual girl who never seemed to tire, capable of standing motionless in the dark for hours on end. According to the governess, the girl had one peculiar trait. She spoke only in whispers and appeared to understand Latin, despite never having studied it. The second document was a payroll record from 1897, listing expenses on equipment, strange for a farm. Surgical instruments, glass vessels, extracts of arsenic and belladonna, and a preparation called sea clay extract, a term not found in any pharmacopoeia of the era. The order was placed under the name E. Denver. At this point, the investigation took a new direction. Whereas before it had been thought that Denvers might be isolated lunatics with paranoia, it now became clear they were engaged in a methodical activity, perhaps not alone. Experts began cross-referencing reports of children exhibiting unusual behavior in Monroe County and surrounding areas. One such case was the disappearance of 3 students from a church school in 1895. All 3, boys aged 10 to 13, vanished after Mass. The school was located just 40 miles from the Denver farm. No bodies, no traces were ever found. The only clue left behind were scribbles on a bench discovered a week later. Livy came. We went down with her. Some locals claimed the girl appeared later at the edges of villages. She was seen near wells, along forest trails, and even by an old hospital closed after a typhus epidemic. No one could catch or interrogate her. She seemed unaffected by time, fear, or age. Those who tried to approach her would faint, lose consciousness, or later develop stuttering. Following the publication of these details in a local newspaper, the editorial archives received a letter signed only with the initials MR. It contained a few cryptic lines. Livy is not a child, and the Denvers are not her parents. They are her creators, or guardians, and she is not finished with what she started. From this point, Livy became the central figure of the investigation. To understand her nature, researchers went to the one place where she was reportedly seen longest, the Fort Barrow Psychiatric Asylum. According to unconfirmed reports, she was brought there in 1898. And it was there that the most inexplicable events in the county's history began. Fort Barrow Psychiatric Asylum, founded in 1852 deep in the heart of Iowa, was known for its strict regime and complete isolation. Initially established for military veterans suffering from severe psychological trauma, by the late 1880s, it began admitting civilians as well. Among its patients were religious fanatics, women diagnosed with hysteria, and those whom the era simply labeled as incomprehensible. Formally, the name Livy does not appear in Fort Barrow's records. However, the admissions ledger from 1898 includes a mysterious entry, a patient listed only as LV, age undetermined. Reason for hospitalization: incongruity of speech and behavioral patterns, not subject to classification. Within the first week of LV's arrival, the institution recorded 2 serious incidents. 3 patients experienced sudden, unexplained deterioration in mental and physical health. 1 died of cardiac arrest, despite having no prior heart condition. Meanwhile, medical staff began reporting insomnia, hallucinations, and a disturbing sensation of constantly being watched. Chief Physician Edmund Barlow noted in his report, "LV was calm, almost entirely motionless, but the building seemed to change upon her arrival. Footsteps echoed down empty halls. Doors opened on their own. Patients began speaking in dead languages they had no way of knowing." Within 2 months, the hospital began to lose staff en masse. One nurse reported hearing a voice each night urging her to burn the ward. Another orderly claimed a girl with hollow eyes came to him in dreams, whispering, "Unbind me." The most bizarre case involved a young doctor named Randall Crean, who left behind 20 handwritten pages, discovered after his sudden disappearance. In them, he described patient LV as biologically stable, but experientially absent. Crean claimed he had not seen her blink even once in over 3 weeks. He also made one of the investigation's most disturbing observations. She does not breathe like others. There is no rhythm. One moment, her chest is completely still. The next, a rapid series of contractions, as if something inside her is waking up. On August 28, 1898, Fort Barrow went up in flames. The fire originated in the southern wing, where LV's room was located. 17 people perished, including patients and 2 guards. The cause of the fire was never determined. At the site of the blaze, investigators found a charred bed frame, but no body. No biological remains believed to belong to LV were ever discovered. Official reports state that the patient was evacuated, but later died of injuries. However, the medical discharge file contains no death date. Even more puzzling, 6 years later, in 1904, someone identified again as LV appears in the records of a private clinic in Massachusetts. Once again, no full name, no confirmed age, and the exact same symptoms. This raises the inevitable question: could LV have been Livy? And if so, who or what was she? On the surface, the Denver family always appeared respectable. Henry Denver, a veteran of the Civil War, later became a pharmacist and a well-regarded citizen of Buchanan County, Missouri. His wife, Agnes, originally from Boston, came from a deeply religious family rooted in Puritan traditions. They had no children of their own, and when Livy appeared, she was seen by neighbors and acquaintances as a long-awaited blessing after years of fruitless attempts to conceive. But when researchers began reconstructing the family archive, certain discoveries emerged, details that fit no known version of their official biography. The first troubling revelation was the discovery of a handwritten book, found in 1941 in the attic of the now-abandoned Denver house. It remained in a private collection until the 1970s, then disappeared, only for its digitized pages to resurface in a private archive database in 2022. The book had no title. On the first page was a symbol, a tangle of eyes encircled by what appeared to be Sumerian ideograms. The contents were a mix of ritual descriptions, procedural instructions, and personal notes. One figure recurred throughout. The third, described as without memory but with inheritance, and embedded in flesh but rejected by spirit. One ritual, in particular, was documented in unsettling detail. It was to be performed on a child under the age of 7 and required 7 days of fasting, a circle of mirrors, animal blood, and absolute silence from all participants. The stated goal: to open the gates into another mind. At the bottom of the page was a signature: A.D. Could these be the initials of Agnes Denver? Further examination of local archives revealed another deeply buried fact. In 1893, the Denvers had already adopted a daughter, a girl named Elaine, taken from an orphanage in St. Louis. Just 1 year later, she disappeared. A brief column in a regional newspaper referenced the loss of a child under unknown circumstances. No investigation followed. When journalists in the 1970s tried to dig deeper into the Denvers' history, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. Almost all documents relating to the family between 1890 and 1900 were either missing or partially burned. Medical records, tax receipts, even the 1897 census of Buchanan County, all gone. One of the few surviving artifacts is a photograph dated 1895. It shows 3 figures: Henry, Agnes, and a young girl, perhaps 8 years old. Her face appears blurry, as if the camera refused to focus on her. On the back, scrawled in charcoal, "The second did not endure. The third will be the last." If Elaine was the second and Livy the third, then the obvious question is, what happened to the first? No definitive answer has yet been found, but what is increasingly clear is that the story of the Denver family is not just one of eerie events or tragic misfortune. It points to a deliberate, systematic participation in something far beyond faith, science, or morality. Their goal may have been to create a vessel, or perhaps transfer a consciousness, or maybe something even older. Livy Denver disappeared in the fall of 1901. She was 13. Officially, she drowned in the river. The body was never recovered. The case was closed swiftly, and no one in the town seemed inclined to question it. It was as if the community itself was eager to forget she had ever existed. But over a century later, in 2018, a forgotten patient file was uncovered in the archives of Maple Hollow Psychiatric Hospital, located nearly 200 kilometers from Buchanan. The file was stored in a section labeled Unidentified Individuals, and it bore no name, only the initials LD and a date of admission, November 3, 1901. Exactly 3 days after Livy's presumed death. The document describes the arrival of a female adolescent, estimated age 12 to 14, brought in by a group of farmers who found her at night inside an abandoned grain silo. Her body showed multiple wounds, burned scars, and signs of severe malnutrition. She could not speak. She did not respond to her name. Her eyes were fixed on a single point, unmoving. The attending physicians noted that while she posed no physical threat, she exhibited extreme psychological instability. Over the next 14 years, the girl referred to as LD remained in Maple Hollow's locked ward. Staff attempted to rehabilitate her, to teach her language, social behavior, memory recovery. All efforts failed. The only consistent behavior she displayed was drawing, on walls, on bed sheets, on her own skin. Always the same pattern. A circle containing 3 human figures with a symbol between them, a single eye, cracked through like glass. The drawings would reappear again and again, no matter how often she was restrained, sedated, or placed in isolation. In 1915, under unexplained circumstances, LD vanished. No records of discharge, no signs of escape, no staff recollection. She simply ceased to be. That could have been the end of the story. But in 2022, independent researcher Jordan Fisher, studying the origins of family cults in the American Midwest, discovered troubling links between 19th century adoptive families and obscure esoteric practices, some dating back to pre-Christian belief systems. These rituals often involved soul transference, sacrificial rites, and the preservation of ancestral memory. According to Fisher's theory, certain families had tried to create what he called a container, a human vessel capable of housing an external consciousness or knowledge without destroying the host identity. These attempts were masked as adoptions, medical care, or even religious upbringing. As part of his research, Fisher examined old church records from Buchanan and made a startling discovery. In 1882, 13 years before the adoption of their first known daughter, Elaine, a baby named Livy Denver was baptized at the Church of St. Lazarus. This meant that the name, Livy, existed in the Denver family long before she was supposedly brought in from the orphanage. More disturbingly, the name reappeared. This supported a deeper hypothesis. Livy was not just any girl, but rather the third attempt to implant something, a name, a consciousness, an essence, into a new vessel. And each adoption had been nothing more than a disguised ritual. Confirmation came from an unexpected source. A vacated safety deposit box in Kansas City was opened during a digital archiving project. Among mundane contents was a glass jar of human baby teeth, labeled The Third, Year 3. Alongside it, a journal bound in skin. Inside the journal, neatly handwritten notes documented behaviors, dates, symptoms, responses to rites, annotations to something called the elder source, and references to a circle configuration. One of the final entries read, "The container has begun to resist. The separation is unstable. The eye within her is open, but does not look here. If the third fails, there will be a final." The final. This echoes the chilling message found on the back of the old family photograph. The second did not endure. The third will be the last. It's now evident that for at least 20 years, the Denver family engaged in a deliberate sequence of rituals, each involving a child, each one a sacrificial vessel in a repeated rite of transference. This was not religious devotion. It was methodical, calculated, cold. Only one question remains. Why? After analyzing the documents recovered from the safety deposit box in Kansas City, it became clear that the ritual imposed upon the Denver family's adopted children was neither spontaneous nor experimental. Instead, it followed a precise structure, symbolic, numerical, and even geographic in nature. Jordan Fisher, the independent researcher studying Midwestern family cults, uncovered striking correlations between the dates when children disappeared from orphanages and schools across Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa, and the religious dates recorded in the so-called Calendar of Eyes. This text, allegedly transcribed from a charred manuscript discovered in Vermont in 1864, detailed cycles of invasions, specific days when the boundary between worlds supposedly grew thinner. The year 1897 stood out as particularly disturbing. According to archival newspaper reports, more than 17 children, all between the ages of 9 and 13, vanished from orphanages within a 300-mile radius of Buchanan, Missouri. None were ever found. Official explanations ranged from illnesses to fires, and even runaway cases. However, no bodies were recovered, no evidence left behind, no witnesses came forward. No criminal investigations were ever launched. By the turn of the century, these disappearances ceased to be random. They became ritualized. At the Chicago clinic where Dr. Gerard Alton worked in 1902, a private diary was discovered that mentioned strange people from Iowa bringing children who cannot be sedated and pleading for assistance in conducting procedures involving galvanic helmets. One preserved entry read, "They claim the child hasn't fully opened. They speak of redirecting into a body. They inquire about procedures to release the second sight." No names were given, but the clinic's visitor logs from that period include a couple, Adam and Elaine Denver. Meanwhile, in the surrounding counties, documents began to surface describing bizarre ritual schools funded through private donations. Officially, these were schools for troubled children. In reality, they operated as isolated institutions without any government licenses. Several such schools were shuttered in 1910, officially for illegal confinement of minors. Yet, no criminal charges were ever filed. All of this points to one conclusion. The Denver family was not alone. They were part of something much larger, a hidden community operating covertly across decades, perhaps even centuries. They had a system, a language, a set of symbols, and an underlying structure. Their goal was transmission, or perhaps extraction, not of a person, but of an essence. The most chilling discovery came with the decoding of pages from the leather-bound journal found alongside the teeth. On one of the last pages was a diagram. At the center, a circle. Around its edges, symbols representing water, ash, salt, and tooth. Beneath the diagram, a caption. Into the vessel enter three. One speaks, one watches, one remembers. The one who remembers will be the last. When recalling the diary of the Denver family's first adopted daughter, Elaine, a particular entry stands out. They told me I must remember. I must be the one who does not forget. If all three children, Elaine, Martha, and Livy, were prepared for distinct roles, it implies the ritual was completed. But this raises a profound question. What exactly was transferred? And where did those who performed this ritual disappear to? In late 2023, historian Jessica Hull, who had been investigating the Denver family case, traveled to the regional archives of the state of Kansas. While combing through old cadastral documents, she uncovered a land registration dated 1876, marking ownership of a parcel in the southeastern part of the state. The owner, Adam Denver. Alongside the land registration was a note about a structure listed as non-residential, religious in nature. No photographs of the building survived, but the archived description was unsettling. A one-story construction made from black wood, without windows, and a single north-facing door. Locals at the time reportedly called it the House of the Listening One, a place where silent services were held, during which speaking the name of God was strictly forbidden. According to tax records, the Denver family continued to pay property taxes on this land until 1964, long after all its known members were either deceased or officially missing. Following the coordinates deep into an overgrown and abandoned forest lot, Jessica and a team of volunteers found the site. Most of the structure was gone. Only the decayed foundation remained, but partially concealed beneath the earth, disguised as a waste pit. They discovered an entrance to what turned out to be a subterranean chamber. Inside, time had taken its toll, but remnants of the original ritual space remained. The walls were etched with symbols, a mix of runes, numeric sequences, and what appeared to be coded writing. Nearly all matched entries from Elaine Denver's diary, the photographic tiles from the 1900s archive, and even the scratches on the walls of Devin Greeley's apartment. But the most disturbing element was the central wall. It was inlaid with teeth, hundreds of them, both child and adult, arranged in patterns, each accompanied by a small etched inscription, initials, dates, and a single-word designation. Remembers, speaks, carries, saw. It became painfully clear. This place was the heart of the ritual around which the life of the Denver family revolved. Papers hidden in a compartment beneath the wall revealed what had taken place here. Family members were brought from multiple states to this location. Here, they underwent something referred to in the documents as the memory census. Each participant was given a small nameplate. Then, one tooth was extracted, an act described as the seal that binds the voice to the flesh. But the most terrifying artifact lay at the center of the underground room, inside a stone sarcophagus. It held a charred doll, stuffed with what later analysis revealed to be human hair. A wooden plaque beneath it bore a name: Elaine Denver. Elaine was not merely a participant. She had become a symbol, or perhaps something more, a keeper of the rite, a vessel. Additional documents found at the site made another detail painfully clear. The ritual was not a one-time event. It was cyclical. It was performed every 33 years. The last recorded event, 1990, the next predicted date, 2023, Jessica realized, with growing dread, that Devin Greeley's death was no coincidence. It was part of a sequence, a reawakening of the rite. In her private notes, she wrote a chilling observation. If I'm right, someone alive right now is carrying not just memories, but something more. He is the vessel, and it won't stop until the vessel is full. Everything she uncovered pointed toward one conclusion. The ritual never ended. It simply changed form. From darkness, it moved into the shadows of the modern world. In an age of orphan databases, anonymous adoptions, and fragmented families, there was no longer a need for temples or sanctuaries. There was no longer a need to build houses for rites. You only needed to raise the right child. And then, wait, when everything is gathered, the documents, the diaries, the symbols, the deaths, what emerges can only be described as a legacy without form. The Denver family left no manifesto, no doctrine, no clear religion. Their essence survives in fragments, in symbols, in implications, in photographs with faces scratched out, in houses without windows, in rituals where no words are allowed. They hid too much, and it seems they didn't do it out of fear of exposure, but because they understood something, because they knew that knowledge is an anchor, and those who stare too long into their past risk becoming part of it. This is not a metaphor. Since our first publication on the Denver family, we have received 7 letters, all from unrelated people living in different states, none of whom had heard of the Denvers before our report. Each one describes the same experiences: dreams of an attic with a rocking chair, a sensation of sand underfoot on bare concrete, a voice whispering just behind them, "You were here, always." These were not just stories. One of the letters came from a mathematics professor in St. Louis. After weeks of insomnia and anxiety following his deep dive into the case, he was examined by a doctor. On the inside of his cheek, a tooth was found growing, inward. No dental test could determine its source. The man had never noticed anything unusual until he started researching the Denvers. Coincidence? Maybe. But this is a family that vanished from the world without a single confirmed descendant. This is a family whose children wrote not of actions, but of influences, of rooms that changed shape, of feelings inherited like heirlooms, of places that disappeared from maps as if they'd never been there. And we are speaking of a ritual, one that was meant to end in sacrifice, but never did. On one of the last recovered artifacts, a stone tablet, likely stolen from a burial site in the 1920s, there is a carved inscription. The language is English, but in a strange, archaic form. "Let the weight of memory fall where it may. The vessel must carry all, or all shall fall." The Denver family is gone, but memory is not. And if they truly were trying to preserve something, if their rituals were not acts of madness, but attempts to contain something, then the central question remains unanswered. What happens if the vessel is broken? Or worse, what if it already is? We've told you everything we could find about the Denver family, the symbols, the sites, the names, the bloodlines. More questions than answers. But maybe, in the end, answers aren't what we're meant to find.